The Cleveland Browns coaching search just hit a wall so hard it might have cracked the foundation in Berea. Just hours before what was supposed to be a pivotal second interview on Wednesday morning, former Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel picked up his phone and delivered the message that Jimmy Haslam probably never saw coming. He was out. Completely out, withdrawing his name from consideration for a job that, let's be honest, the Browns desperately needed him to want. And just like that, the chaos that has defined this franchise for over a decade came roaring back with a vengeance, leaving owner Jimmy Haslam staring down the barrel of yet another disaster in what has become an almost comically cursed coaching search. If you're watching this video right now, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this story has layers upon layers of dysfunction, backroom drama, and what might be one of the most embarrassing rejections in recent NFL history. And trust me, when we're talking about the Cleveland Browns, that's saying something. So, let's rewind to where this all began. Just 2 weeks ago, the Browns made the decision to fire Kevin Stefanski, a two-time NFL Coach of the Year who had led them to the playoffs twice in his 6 seasons. The decision was controversial, sure, but understandable when you consider that the Browns had gone an abysmal 8 wins and 26 losses over the past 2 seasons. The offense was broken, quarterback Deshaun Watson was a nightmare both on and off the field, and the franchise was staring at yet another rebuilding project. But here's the thing. Firing Stefanski while keeping general manager Andrew Berry raised immediate red flags. It felt incomplete, like trying to remodel your house but only fixing half the roof. And those red flags, they just burst into flames this week. Enter Mike McDaniel. The 42-year-old offensive mastermind had just been fired by the Miami Dolphins after 4 seasons where he went 35 wins and 33 losses. Not a disaster by any means, but Miami struggled down the stretch, missing the playoffs in back-to-back seasons after making it in his first 2 years. McDaniel was known for 2 things: his innovative offensive schemes that had the Dolphins ranked first in total offense in 2023, and his connection to the legendary Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. He had worked under Shanahan, learned from the best, and even spent time in Cleveland back in 2014 as the wide receivers coach. He knew the building, he knew the dysfunction, and apparently he wanted absolutely no part of going back. The Browns had interviewed McDaniel virtually in their first round of interviews, along with 8 other candidates. Things seemed promising. General manager Andrew Berry and the Browns brass were reportedly excited about McDaniel's potential to fix the anemic offense that had plagued them for years. McDaniel checked boxes. He had head coaching experience, he understood offensive innovation, he was part of the Shanahan tree, which has produced some of the most successful coaches in the NFL. And critically, McDaniel was biracial, meaning his interview would help satisfy the NFL's Rooney Rule, which requires teams to conduct in-person interviews with at least 2 external minority candidates before making a hire. The Browns had planned for McDaniel and Los Angeles Rams passing game coordinator Nate Scheelhaase to be those 2 interviews. Everything was set. McDaniel was scheduled to fly into Cleveland on Wednesday morning for his second in-person interview. The Browns were ready to roll out the red carpet, to pitch him on the vision, the young talent like Myles Garrett, the draft capital with 2 first-round picks in 2026, and the opportunity to build something special. And then Tuesday afternoon happened. Reports started trickling in around midday. Mike McDaniel had informed the Browns that he was withdrawing from their head coaching search. Just like that. No second interview. No chance to make a final impression. He was done with Cleveland before the process even got to the finish line. And the timing? Absolutely brutal. This was less than 24 hours before he was supposed to be sitting in a conference room in Berea, shaking hands and talking about offensive schemes and locker room culture. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The reason McDaniel pulled out wasn't because he decided to take another head coaching job. No, McDaniel was headed to Los Angeles to interview with the Chargers for their offensive coordinator position. That's right, he chose to interview for a coordinator job, a step down from head coach, rather than continue pursuing the Browns' head coaching gig. Let that sink in for a moment. A guy who was just a head coach for 4 years in Miami would rather go back to being an offensive coordinator than lead the Cleveland Browns. And by Tuesday night, ESPN's Adam Schefter confirmed what everyone suspected. McDaniel was expected to accept the Chargers' offensive coordinator position, reuniting with Jim Harbaugh and getting the chance to work with elite quarterback Justin Herbert. Now you might be asking, why would McDaniel do this? Why would he take what appears to be a demotion instead of getting another head coaching opportunity? The answer is complicated, but also painfully obvious if you know anything about the Cleveland Browns organization. First, McDaniel likely saw the writing on the wall. The Browns' job is a mess. They have no clear starting quarterback. Deshaun Watson is being pushed out after a fully guaranteed contract that has been an unmitigated disaster. They're reportedly drafting Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders, but he's unproven at the NFL level. The offensive line is in shambles. They only have one starter under contract for 2026, and injuries decimated what little depth they had. The wide receiver room lacks a true number one, and defensively, while they have studs like Myles Garrett, there's uncertainty about whether defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz would even stay if an offensive-minded coach like McDaniel was hired. But beyond the roster issues, there's the much bigger problem: Jimmy Haslam. The owner has a reputation, and it's not a good one. Since Haslam bought the Browns in 2012, he has hired 5 full-time head coaches. Rob Udinski lasted 1 season, Mike McDaniel lasted 2, Hugh Jackson somehow survived an 0-16 season and a 1-15 season before finally getting fired halfway through his 3rd year. Freddie Kitchens lasted 1 disastrous season, and now Kevin Stefanski, the only one who had any sustained success, is gone after 6 years. That's 5 coaches in 13 years, and none of them, except Stefanski, even sniffed a winning record. Udinski, McDaniel, Jackson, and Kitchens have never been head coaches in the NFL since leaving Cleveland. That tells you everything you need to know about how toxic that job has been. Reports over the years have painted a picture of Haslam as an owner who meddles, who listens to too many voices, who makes impulsive decisions, and who has fostered a culture of dysfunction and infighting within the organization. There have been stories of Haslam overruling his front office on draft picks. Remember when he reportedly pushed for Johnny Manziel? There have been accounts of executives and coaches being blindsided by firings. There's the infamous ESPN report from 2019 that detailed how Haslam was the only person in the building who wanted to hire Hugh Jackson, while everyone else on the executive team wanted Sean McDermott, who has gone on to massive success with the Buffalo Bills. And just recently, when asked about the perception of dysfunction in his organization, Haslam bristled, saying he takes huge exception to people calling the Browns dysfunctional. But perception is reality in the NFL, and the perception is that the Browns are a coaching graveyard. Mike McDaniel knows all of this. He spent time in Cleveland in 2014 as the wide receivers coach under Mike McDaniel. He saw the dysfunction up close. He watched as Kyle Shanahan, his mentor, was so desperate to escape the Browns that he built an entire presentation explaining why he should be allowed to break his contract for a lateral move to the Atlanta Falcons. McDaniel lived through that chaos, and now, nearly 12 years later, apparently nothing has changed.
So when the Chargers came calling with the offensive coordinator position, McDaniel saw a lifeline. The Chargers have Justin Herbert, one of the most talented young quarterbacks in the NFL. They have Jim Harbaugh, a proven winner who just led Michigan to a national championship before returning to the NFL. They have stability. They have a clear vision. And most importantly, they don't have Jimmy Haslam as the owner. For McDaniel, this wasn't even a difficult decision. Take the coordinator job in a healthy organization with an elite quarterback, or gamble on being the next sacrificial lamb in Cleveland. He chose the former. And honestly, can you blame him? But here's where McDaniel's decision becomes a nuclear bomb for the Browns. By withdrawing, he didn't just cost Cleveland a candidate, he created a massive compliance problem with the NFL's Rooney Rule. Remember, the Browns needed 2 in-person interviews with minority candidates. McDaniel was one of those 2. Nate Scheelhaase, the Rams passing game coordinator, is the other. But Scheelhaase can't interview until after the NFC Championship game, which means the Browns are stuck in limbo. They can't hire anyone, even if they wanted to, until they satisfy the Rooney Rule. And now they need to find another minority candidate to interview, someone who hasn't been part of their process, someone who will probably see this as a token interview just to check a box. This is an unforced error of epic proportions. Andrew Berry and the Browns front office should have had more than 2 minority candidates lined up from the beginning. The fact that they put all their eggs in the McDaniel and Scheelhaase basket shows a lack of foresight and planning. And now, with McDaniel out, they're scrambling. They have 5 other known candidates still in the mix. Jim Schwartz, their own defensive coordinator who interviewed on Monday, Todd Monken, the Ravens offensive coordinator who interviewed on Tuesday, Grant Udinski, the 30-year-old Jaguars offensive coordinator who would be the youngest head coach in NFL history if hired, Jesse Minter, the Chargers defensive coordinator who is getting second interviews with multiple teams, and Scheelhaase, who can't interview until next week at the earliest. But here's the problem. Multiple reports suggest that the Browns have already narrowed their focus. Some insiders believe Jim Schwartz is the frontrunner, a safe, veteran choice who would bring continuity on defense, but raises questions about who would run the offense. Others think Grant Udinski, the young offensive prodigy, is the target. But if the Browns want to hire either of them or anyone else on that list, they can't until they complete another in-person minority interview. And who's going to want to come in at this late stage knowing they're likely just a checkbox? It's disrespectful to the candidates, it's a bad look for the Browns, and it highlights just how poorly this search has been managed. And let's talk about the optics for a second. Mike McDaniel pulling out of the Browns search and immediately signing with the Chargers sends a message to the entire NFL. It says that the Browns are not an attractive destination. It says that even candidates who desperately want to be head coaches again are willing to pass on Cleveland in favor of stability elsewhere. And it's not just McDaniel. Remember, before the search even started, there were whispers about John Harbaugh, the longtime Ravens coach, who was surprisingly fired after 18 years. Harbaugh grew up in the Cleveland area, went to games with his family as a kid, and had expressed interest in potentially coaching the Browns. It would have been a storybook hire, a hometown hero returning to save the franchise. But according to multiple reports, Harbaugh wasn't interested because he didn't want to work under Andrew Berry. He wanted control over personnel, and the Browns weren't willing to give him that. So Harbaugh is now linked to other jobs, and the Browns missed out on arguably their dream candidate. This pattern is exhausting. The Browns keep making the same mistakes over and over. They fire coaches without fixing the underlying problems. They retain general managers who haven't proven they can build a winner. They allow an owner with a track record of dysfunction to remain too involved in football decisions, and they wonder why top candidates are running in the opposite direction.
Jimmy Haslam stood in front of reporters after firing Kevin Stefanski and said that ownership takes full responsibility for where the Browns are. He said that winning 8 games in 2 years is horrible and totally unacceptable. He promised that it's not going to continue. But those are just words. We've heard those words before. Haslam said similar things after firing Rob Udinski, after firing Mike McDaniel, after firing Hugh Jackson, after firing Freddie Kitchens. And yet, here we are again, watching another coaching search implode in real time. The frustration among Browns fans is palpable. This is a fan base that has stuck by this team through decades of losing. They've endured the relocation in the 90s, the return as an expansion team in 99, and 25 years of mostly misery since. They've seen 1 playoff win in all that time. 1. They've watched rival teams like the Steelers and Ravens dominate the division with stability and smart leadership. Pittsburgh had Bill Cowher for 15 years, then Mike Tomlin for 19 years, 2 coaches in 34 years, both Super Bowl winners. The Ravens had Brian Billick for 9 years, then John Harbaugh for 18 years, 2 coaches in 27 years, both Super Bowl winners. The Browns? They've had 13 different head coaches, permanent or interim, since 1999, 13, and none of them have delivered a championship or even sustained success. The stark contrast is almost cruel. While the Steelers and Ravens are model franchises that attract top talent and build dynasties, the Browns are cautionary tale. And now, as all three teams search for new head coaches at the same time, the difference is glaring. The Ravens and Steelers will have their pick of top candidates. The Browns, they're getting rejected by guys who'd rather be coordinators. And here's the worst part. This coaching search is only the beginning of the Browns' off-season problems. They have massive roster holes to fill. They need to figure out their quarterback situation. They have limited cap space. They're dealing with the fallout of the Deshaun Watson contract, one of the worst decisions in NFL history. They have 2 first-round picks, which is great, but history suggests they'll probably screw those up too. And now, with the coaching search dragging on because of self-inflicted wounds, they're falling behind other teams who are already moving forward with their hires. The Tennessee Titans hired Robert Saleh. The Atlanta Falcons hired Kevin Stefanski, the guy the Browns just fired. The New York Jets are moving quickly through their process. Even the Las Vegas Raiders and Baltimore Ravens, who are also searching, seem more organized than Cleveland. The Browns are once again the laughingstock of the league, and it didn't have to be this way. Mike McDaniel's decision to withdraw is more than just one candidate saying no. It's a referendum on the entire organization. It's a signal that the Browns are still viewed as a dysfunctional mess, no matter how many times Jimmy Haslam insists otherwise. It's proof that the same issues that plagued this franchise for over a decade are still very much alive. And it's a harsh reminder that until ownership changes, or until Haslam truly steps back and lets football people make football decisions, the Browns are doomed to repeat the same cycle of failure. As of now, the Browns are still conducting interviews. Grant Udinski met with them on Friday. Jesse Minter interviewed on Thursday. Todd Monken and Jim Schwartz have already had their second interviews. Nate Scheelhaase is still waiting in the wings, unable to meet until after the Rams finish their playoff run. And somewhere, the Browns front office is scrambling to find another minority candidate to interview just to satisfy league rules. It's chaos. It's embarrassing. And it's vintage Cleveland Browns. The question now is, who will actually take this job? Jim Schwartz, the 59-year-old defensive coordinator who has been with the team for 3 years, seems like the safe bet. He has support within the organization, and players respect him, but he's never been a head coach before, and at his age, is he really the long-term answer? Grant Udinski, the wonderkind offensive coordinator, would be an exciting hire, but he's only 30 years old and has never run a team. Is he ready for the pressure cooker that is the Cleveland Browns? Jesse Minter has defensive pedigree and worked under Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, but other teams want him too, and those teams might be more attractive. Todd Monken is respected, but he's 59 and has never been a head coach. Nate Scheelhaase is intriguing, but might be a year or two early for a head coaching job. None of these options inspire overwhelming confidence, and that's the problem. The Browns started this search hoping to land a big name, someone who could galvanize the fan base and bring credibility. Instead, they're left picking from a list of candidates who range from solid to speculative, and they've already been rejected by the guy many thought was their best bet. This is the reality of being the Cleveland Browns in 2026. You can have all the draft capital in the world, you can have superstars like Myles Garrett on your roster, you can have a passionate fan base that fills the stadium every week, but if you have an owner who creates dysfunction, a front office that makes questionable decisions, and a culture that repels top coaching talent, none of it matters. You're just spinning your wheels hoping that somehow, some way, you'll stumble into success. Mike McDaniel saw all of this and said, no thanks. He'd rather work as an assistant under Jim Harbaugh in Los Angeles than be the next head coach in Cleveland. And that single decision might be the most damning indictment of the Browns organization you could possibly imagine. It's a rejection that echoes far beyond just one coaching candidate. It's a statement about how the Browns are perceived across the NFL. And until something fundamental changes, whether that's new ownership, a complete front office overhaul, or a genuine commitment to stability and smart decision-making, the Browns will remain stuck in this purgatory.
Jimmy Haslam wanted to run the Browns like the Steelers, with patience and stability. Instead, he's run them into the ground with constant turnover and dysfunction. And now, as the coaching search limbo continues, the only question left is whether this franchise will ever learn from its mistakes, or if we're destined to watch this same nightmare play out again and again.
This story is based on reports from ESPN, NFL Network, Yahoo Sports, Sports Illustrated, and various other outlets covering the ongoing Browns coaching search. Information is subject to change as the situation develops. The views expressed in this video are commentary based on publicly available information and ongoing developments within the NFL.